the City Hall,
Wi-Fi.
the Wi-Fi?
I don't know it. Mine just connects automatically.
See, this is what happens.
Yeah.
You forget it once it connects.
Right.
over.
Hers is automatic, she said.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay,
You don't need to remember it.
well, let's begin. I'm sorry we had to screw up with this material. So if we can just, I'll pass you stuff what I'm talking about. Okay. Let's begin by introducing our new members. We have two new members, and I want to give each of them a chance to introduce themselves and give a little background and why they're interested in serving on the commission. So Mary, we'll start with you.
Hi, good afternoon, thanks. My name is Mary Snyder. I live over on Pennsylvania Avenue here in Cape May, and been living here full-time since May of 2019. But prior to that, I actually worked as a nurse. I'm a registered nurse, but once a nurse, always a nurse, right? But I really actually ended up working in administration for probably 25 of my 42 years, 30 years. My background really is critical care nursing, but then I did also patient safety, risk. I was director of risk management, director of patient safety and quality. And then I did an early retirement from my facility up in Philadelphia in 2014. I took a little sabbatical time, and I actually ended up working for ECRI Institute in Bluebell, which is, again, another big patient safety organization. Worked there until I retired in July of 2021. So I'm interested in getting involved. I was involved where I lived up in Warwick, Pennsylvania. I worked on some of the committees up in my municipality there. And also I was president of my homeowners association at the time. So I just thought this would be kind of a nice committee. I know you guys do you've done a lot of work that I thought was very interesting, and I thought it'd be, also talked to Maureen McDade, and she said it's a great committee, so I said, that's the one I want to join. I'm also on the bike and pedestrian safety as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
What facility were you in?
I was at, let's see, started at Frankfurt Hospital, Aria Health, Jefferson, whatever, so they
Wow.
all, but
We're
that
all
was
over.
pretty much, I was all three of the campuses for the Aria,
Yeah.
Torresdale, Bucks, and Frankfurt campus.
Okay. And our other new member?
I'm Steve Bodner. Hi, everybody. I also live in Village Green, and I live on Pennsylvania Avenue. So,
Oh, wait a minute, do we have a bylaw against this?
well, we all get along very well on Pennsylvania Avenue, so I'm sure we're all going to get along very, very well.
Now that
here
you've got
as well.
yourself paved, that's everything is,
Yeah. So I'm a full-time resident of Cape May. My wife and I, we've had our property in Cape May since 2008, but we became full-time residents just this past April. And that being said, I've been coming to Cape May my entire life. My parents bought a house on Virginia Avenue in 1975. I spent my summers here. I worked for the Hobers at the rest of Rusty Nail. I worked at the Washington Inn when the Craigs owned it before I'm sorry, actually even before the Craigs, when the Canes, when Mr. and Mrs. Kane owned it. That was my first job when I was 16 years old, washing dishes at the Washington Inn. So Cape May is very near and dear to my heart, spending a lot of time here. And now that we're full-time residents, couldn't be happier because this is the place where we want to be. But my background is I'm an attorney by trade. I was an assistant prosecutor in Burlington County for 22 years, and I retired from the prosecutor's office. After retiring from that, retirement didn't stick. Back in private practice, and I work for a small firm, and continuing to do that. As far as why I want to be involved in this committee, I'm very interested in the issues with Cape May. Love the city, have always felt dialed in to the issues, paid attention to them, and I want to participate and be a part of helping with the solutions. And I follow what's going on, particularly with this committee. Spoke with Maureen. She suggested that this may be a good group to get involved with, and I think all of the committees are great that are involved with Cape May, but particularly attracted to this one, and I suspect that my dad is looking down on me right now and saying, "Son, I always wanted you to be an accountant instead of an attorney." So you're finally doing something with numbers. Yeah, so I didn't go in that direction. I went in a different direction. But now, like I said, he's probably looking at this and nodding his head in a favorable way and saying, "Good job, son, that's a good group to join."
Great, thank you. These two folks are obviously great examples of the kind of people that we need on committees like this, and we're very happy to have both of you with us. Thanks for serving. Appreciate it. All right, let's jump around on the agenda. Let's go to Realtor discussion, and Chris? Oh, this,
What is it?
here's the password. It's that number.
So it's it's just 609?
Yeah.
The whole number?
609-884-9525.
There you go.
Okay. Hey, Zach.
Hey, Mayor. Good, buddy.
Hi, Zach.
Zach's going to stay for the whole meeting.
See you, Zach.
Okay. Thanks, Zach. Thanks, Zach.
Dennis, I said to Dennis, was one of the bigger increases that we're gonna have, and Maureen's gonna probably solve it for us anyway, but is, the healthcare, through the state is really jumping up.
Yes.
They froze it, I think, at 3% on the state level, but on the municipal.
Not only at local levels,
It's
no.
like 23% or something. So, anyway, it's something we might wanna look at, but.
That's on the agenda.
We don't have enough money for that.
That was my client.
Yeah, oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, Zach.
Yeah, and the locals never got.
Okay,
locals always got screwed.
last meeting, we had, we were discussing a report that we made to the city council concerning the residential rentals, the mercantile license applications, and the status of that, given our new increases in fees. And we agreed at that time we could put together a group of realtors to give us a sense of what their reaction to this is too, and perhaps some suggestions that might be able to get us up to a larger number of registering properties. I did ask, realtors are busy, everybody's busy. I did ask 5 realtors in town to join us. Chris was able to make it. The other folks, two of them are out of town, and one of them was scheduled to be here in addition to Chris, and then one is suffering, his entire family is under COVID lockdown at the moment, so. So we'll go with Chris. He will represent Chris, I guess.
Yeah, I'll try to do my best.
Okay. I gave you a copy, and let's just walk through.
Yep.
Let's just walk through this so we get a sense of where we are. This is that. Yeah. No, this is that presentation we made. And it's a summary of our analysis, rather, of, by the numbers, how well the city did with collecting and enforcing the new residential ordinance for fees. And the first 2 slides are background to the issue. The second one, the second page at the top is that, and we got all these numbers from the city when we reviewed all of the filings for residential mercantile licenses. Compliance jumped from 464 in 2020 to 924 in 2021, when we used the old system of everybody paying, no matter what kind of a property it was, everybody paying $75. When we put the new ordinance in effect, creating 6 tiers of fees based on the size of the property, we went up to a significant increase, which, where is it?
Page 4. Page 4.
Page 4. Okay.
1,040 mercantile licenses, up from 924.
Yeah, here it is. We went up to 1,040 licenses and generating a revenue of 148. The issue still remains. This was a good first-year performance, as we all discussed the last time we had a meeting, but in terms of going forward, we identified several issues that the council needed to address, and they are listed under the market inventory. We're looking at compliance at about, what do we say it was? 38%. 38% compliance. Right. And so what we did was we tried to find out from a snapshot of the market, how many people were actually renting versus how many people were complying with the registration. And what we found was we took 5 local agencies and just went to their websites. Not all agencies list the property address or the number of rooms or the sleeping capacity. So we found 5 that did, and we, just to cut the herd a little bit, we extracted from that any advertised property that listed a 5 or more bedrooms. And we identified those, we made a list of them, and we removed any duplicates so that one house is listed at 3 or 4 people's agencies. We count that as one house. And so we found 155 residential rentals that were listed. And then we checked the mercantile listings, and we found that 86 of them had a mercantile license, which means 65 didn't. And that's basically the issue we talked about when we talked about this the last time. That how can we as a city get to a point where everyone who is renting their property has a mercantile license? So with that in mind, I'd like to ask Chris if he can give us some sense of that, of his perspective of that issue, and perhaps some ways we could address that.
Well, the issue itself, I mean, I can speak for every agency I've dealt with. We all, in our listing agreements, it all requires each owner to obtain a mercantile license. You know, we aren't a police agency, so we can't verify that, but doesn't require to be submitted with the application when they rent a property. So for example, we started getting rates for 2023 back in September. Well, they're not going to get a mercantile license for the summer of 2023 until after May 15th or April 15th. So I can't require an owner to show me a mercantile license for 2023 when they submit the rates. That being said, I'm a little surprised by your numbers because, if anything, I would think that the offices in town would have the people that are most compliant with the regulation in getting a mercantile license. I can't speak for every office on that aspect. I can speak for ours. At any point in time we find that somebody doesn't have a mercantile license, we get on it immediately.
Yeah, and also, to make your point, just because a property is listed on an agency's website doesn't mean that agency rented it.
That's correct. And it's because of the software. I mean, we have, so for example, if there's a house that we rented this past season, but is no longer renting next year, they will still show up on the site as a rental because we have to maintain them on there until the fiscal year's done, until we can close out the books and get the accounting done. So we can't,
So in other words, Chris, you wouldn't, for 2023 season, a property could still be listed on there because you haven't closed your
Yep.
fiscal year is 2022?
correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they, as of December 31st. I mean,
Yeah, so their fiscal year is 2022. They're not going to close out their books till January or February. And so it's still going to show, so somebody could be looking at a rental for next summer, and it would show on their,
And the other thing I would say for you to look at, when you found those properties that were advertised, to make the study more accurate, I would look for properties that were not only advertised but had availability. Just because, like you said, just because they're on there doesn't mean they rent. So if there's no availability, there's a chance that they don't rent,
Right.
and it's being advertised
They
without.
also could be renting their property through an Airbnb, because a lot of folks do that.
They could be, but but again, if they are on an agency's website, they signed a listing agreement at one point in time with that agency to allow them to market that property.
Right.
I can't just throw any property on my website in hopes that they may use us one day.
Right.
So Chris, along the lines of Dennis's point, though, there are many property owners who rent, they'll sign with you, but they'll also list on Airbnb and Vrbo at the same time,
Sure.
correct? Okay, so they can be
And,
on multiple sites.
and to take it one step further, we've also started, I know other offices, we use a third-party company that will advertise those properties on VRBO.
Yeah.
So they are listed with us, and as a part of doing business with us, we will provide them that exposure on VRBO also. Now, it costs the tenant more because we're passing those fees of being advertised on that third-party site to them. We compare it to something like if you're shopping for an airline flight. You might get it on Kayak, you might get it on Expedia, you might get it directly with the airline, and you may pay more based on where you book it on, but it's advertised on all those different
So
mediums.
Airbnb, if you make it, if they make that particular situation, if they make that booking on Airbnb, they'd be subject to the occupancy tax.
No. Now, we don't use Airbnb because Airbnb is extremely non-realtor friendly. I don't know of any office that uses it, but VRBO is an example. VRBO, the tenant does pay a fee to VRBO, but the lease is facilitated and handled by my office. So VRBO never sees that lease. They're not a party to the lease. So because the lease is initiated, terminated, and facilitated by my office, then it's subject to the rules as a rental done by realtors. So it was advertised on VRBO and booked through VRBO, and then we
But you
facilitate the
hold the
lease.
primary-
They pick the keys up at our office. We handle all the payments. We handle the deposits, so it goes directly through us.
Yeah, they're just a front face
Yep.
for it, but you manage all of
Yep.
the leasing arrangements as well as the monies.
Correct.
And-
Now, we could have a property that we rent, that we advertise on VRBO, that the owner also advertises on VRBO as their own. If that property is rented directly through the owner on VRBO, then yes, they're subject to the occupancy tax. And that's a question we had for VRBO too, because we don't. And that's an issue I have that I have addressed with VRBO. They're trying to get back to us. What's to prohibit one single property to be on VRBO, let's say 4 times? 3 different offices pushing it over on there and the owner renting on their own. And from my standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, how do I guarantee I'm at the top? But from a logistical standpoint for you, knowing, being able to get accurate numbers, I don't know.
Yeah, right.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, if it's on the RBO, and you in essence, or your client in essence is paying a fee that you pass through to the, and it comes through, so what is the instruction? How do you know, how does it come back to you as the realtor?
We get a feed that comes automatically over from VRBO with all of the tenant's information, contact information. Our software our software is integrated with it, where it actually blocks off the week in our system, and it shows them. It shows them all of the total fees that can be expected for the rental and what the fee schedule is, but it doesn't actually do it for it. Just here's your estimate of what your costs are. You'll be contacted directly by the rental agency, and then we facilitate it.
Because you have a specific listing number that would distinguish the fact that it was through your company versus the owner's.
Correct. Yep.
Listing.
Correct.
It has 2 different numbers based on who.
Yeah.
The ID number.
I would presume that it
yeah.
would have to, yeah.
It would have to within VRBO. There'd have to be so.
VRBO then functions sometimes as an advertising vehicle for you,
Sure.
and sometimes as a rental agent
Correct.
for the owner.
Yeah.
Correct.
But Airbnb, that doesn't happen.
Airbnb has the capability to do it. We choose not to do it, and as far as I know, I don't know that any other offices do it because of their costs are so exorbitant to pass through, or for either for us to eat or to pass through. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
It's more than double, if not triple, what the costs are for VRBO. Airbnb wants to remain an autonomous,
Right.
Independent and have one-on-one.
Yep.
Yeah, and I've spoken to Airbnb about this issue. And one of the things they say they could and would do for Cape May is to identify the properties, the specific properties in Cape May that they have rented. Because now, up to this point, the state, we know how much dollar comes in, because the state gives us an aggregate total, but when we see a line that says Airbnb, $5 million, the state doesn't break that down. So we don't know where that $5 million came from.
Well, as far as which municipality?
Yeah, for the occupancy tax. So the occupancy tax report comes from the state that says Congress Hall, each entity reports their number of occupancy tax dollars collected.
Right.
And then included in that listing is Airbnb, Las Vegas, Nevada.
Right.
And all that money that they report there comes from Cape May Rentals, but it doesn't break down which properties
We don't have the.
No,
details.
no, it doesn't do individual properties, correct. But the bigger issue, which I'm glad you guys addressed and I saw, was it's going to break it down to Cape May specific properties for you, because that has been an age-old problem with real estate in general in this area.
Yeah.
Yeah, we pay for leads on the real estate and for zip code 08204, and I'm paying a premium for those leads, hoping to get people looking at Beach Drive and New Jersey Avenue, and I get a lead for Irma.
Right.
Because it's
You
08204.
anticipated what I was about to say.
Yeah.
Airbnb will break that down for us,
Right.
for just Cape May City, extracting the 08204.
And I think that would benefit the tenants also, because as an outsider, if I'm looking to vacation in Cape May, and I book through Airbnb or VRBO, and I find out I'm in North Cape May by Harpoons, nice area, but I was hoping to be in Cape May. I didn't realize I got to drive 15 minutes to get into town.
Right.
Exactly.
Dennis, now that, well, so to go back to the Verbo, if we believe that it's by individual listing numbers, could we not attempt a conversation with them to be able to discern which ones are?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it would be a good opportunity. And then the other question or the other comment that I had, when, Chris, you were talking about how, these are listed with you. You have and how the challenges are because they won't have their mercantile license till next May. At that point in time, I would presume your office has at least the ability to put together a spreadsheet for all of the rentals for the season or something. I'm looking to see if there's some way to get a report that we could then.
I mean,
Audit
I could do an
against all-
inventory, as an office, I could provide an inventory report of the properties that we rent,
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, even if it was like May, June, July, and August, let's just say, and we had some kind of a report for the 16-week period, to be able to audit that against mercantile license, even if it was a Q&A check to say, are we closer than 38%?
Sure,
Are
and
we
I don't-
closer to a 60%, at least second year in.
And I think that that's not a bad idea. I would have no problem providing some sort of list like that to the city, provided that I notify my owners first that I'm going
Yeah.
to do so. Put them
Well,
on
and I
notice that
think
if they
the
haven't been
letter-
complying, they need to.
Yeah.
I think the bigger issue is you're going to have to take that spreadsheet and make sure the format's the same for any office that complies, because you're going to have to combine those and weed out the duplicates.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying audit. I'm not saying necessarily do a one-on-one, but I think that if we're also have a draft document that's going out to every property owner, and they will be required to attest as to whether or not they are just a property owner or they intend to rent their property. And so this year, and Marty's worked on that, and this year, we are going to say to everybody, regardless of your status, if you own a property in Cape May, you either have to indicate you have no intention to rent, or if you do, here's the rules of engagement.
Now, the only question I have on that, what is the definition of rent? Because the state has a different definition, the real estate commission has a different definition. So for example, for tax purposes,
Do you
if an owner rents their property for 2 weeks or less than,
Tim Martin?
that- yeah, no, for tax purposes, if anybody rents less than 2 weeks, that income's not taxable. So if it's 2 weeks or, they would still need a market.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah, in that case you
So
would, yeah.
maybe, Marty, to that point, and this is where I do think we have to be very exacting in the beginning of this letter, and, you and I have talked about this. We have to be very exacting on the fact that if you are a property owner and you have no intention of renting, you still need to attest to that on this document. And if you have any intention of renting, whether it be from, 1 day to 174 days, then you need to apply for a mercantile license. That kind of language needs to be very front and center on this, because people will not go through and read through to the third paragraph to figure out.
Now, let me play devil's advocate on that. And we all know that 10% of the people are what cause the problems, the other 90% that are actually following the rules. But if I sign a paper that says I don't intend to rent my property, and then I decide in July I'm going to rent, or August I'm going to start renting, what do? Do I fill out a new form? And if you're going to
Gotta
say,
come
well,
get
you
a
can't,
license.
come get a license, well, my circumstances changed, I have hospital bills, or,
Okay.
there's,
Well, further complicating it is there's now a new state law that if you rent your property, you have to have a minimum level of insurance, and you have to provide the city with that document.
yeah, I saw that. That was passed by the state about, a month and a half ago, 2 months ago.
It's a time for us to do this because we have to set up that process as well, where the city is collecting these, so that the city is in compliance, and then anyone that rents their property out has to be in compliance
Right,
too.
because then it becomes a liability, Chris, if they are renting and they're not covered,
Yeah.
you know, just from a public safety standpoint. So
Yeah, and it's,
I think if someone's making a decision halfway through this season that they need to cover hospital bills or for whatever reason, they're going to have to understand that there are some things, some guidelines that they have to apply.
sure, and I would hope they would.
Yeah.
And the ordinance that was passed is actually helpful because in an unambiguous way, it defines making available for rent.
Right,
Whether
right,
you-
right.
Which that ordinance, I was a key part in drafting that ordinance, being a Realtor. I still see the need that we had to regulate that. So, I mean, I remember going through that and getting that done when we passed it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
The other
I mean,
place,
that clarifies it. If you
Yeah.
make your property available for rent
Right.
under any circumstances.
Right. And that's,
Yeah,
Dennis,
yeah,
just
what-
my point in this letter. It's got to be as clear as it can be in the first paragraph, that as a property owner, you either attest that you have no intention, you still have to sign it and submit it. But if you intend
And what to do if something changes midstream that they
exactly.
need to be.
If the circumstances should change, you are still responsible to
so I
apply
don't
for
think
a
this is the only piece of communication we're going to need on this.
Yeah.
For example, as I've gone through this exercise, there are two things that I've realized. One is the mercantile license doesn't transfer with the transfer of property. Okay?
Yep.
So if you buy a house in July and immediately begin to rent it, you need to get a mercantile license in July. And I guess it's already fire inspected, but you need a license. Second thing is you need to then, again, provide proof of insurance because it's a different policy.
Well, there's also an issue. So there is a fire inspection. However, the fire inspection is for the sale of the property, not for the rental of the property.
Exactly.
There are two different clarifications for
That
fire
property
inspections.
would have been fire inspected for mercantile license purposes. So I don't-
Correct, but you would need it again unless they're going to give some sort of waiver.
So, Mary, I think that there is a,
Even in the same year. I could have an owner that gets a mercantile license that gets a fire inspection in April, and they decide they want to sell in May, they have to have another fire inspection done in May, and then they would also have to get another one done for the new mercantile license.
Right.
so I think that there is a second fact sheet for people that we would be providing to the Realtors at point of sale, they could be providing that, explaining what the process, what the procedures are.
Right. And
Question
I
have for
also
you,
think.
Chris, was, in your business cycle, is May 1st too late?
I mean, I made this argument to the city clerk, and prior, when we were going through this, there was a reason I was given on a accounting basis from the city that May 1st was the reason for the mercantile license, what worked for them, but ideally, January through December should be when it is. And the reason I was given also was that it was an accounting issue, and then my argument was if you're going January through December, the dead time of the year for fire inspections and other types of inspections, that's January through March. That's when there's nobody around. That's when houses are vacant. That's when it's easy access. Somebody applies for a mercantile license in April, and now you're trying to get through properties Memorial Day weekend for inspections. Good luck. But so for us, yes, it would be much better if the license ran with the fiscal year.
Probably not ideal because it's the holidays, whatever else,
Right,
that you'd be
right,
trying to
right.
get this done. But even March 1st, I would think would be better for your business cycle so that, I mean, when do you do most of your bookings for the coming summer? Most of the people that register to have you represent their home.
I would say at this point, right now, we're probably 75% booked for next year already. That used to be about 50%, and then you're right, in that January to February range, you would book the bulk of them, because you get families get together during the holidays, they decide where they're going, who's paying, what week they're going, and then after the holidays, somebody starts making the phone call. I've always been on the side of trying to be user-friendly and end-user friendly. From a homeowner standpoint, it would be much easier for them to be January through December because that's easily to remember. They're not going to remember they have to do it March 1st or April 1st or May 1st because it's not a natural time frame to worry about licensing. Now, that may not, in the end, be the most beneficial for the city, and they may need to do it March or April, which is fine. But the more that we can get in line with your typical calendar, the easier it is for the homeowner and for the person that's going to register for the mercantile license. Because I'm sure there are definitely people out there that don't file not for lack of meaning to, but for just lack of forgetting what that time frame is.
Well, and I also want to see that we've got a heavy presence on the city website about this, so that, we're making this, again, front and center, making sure that people can find it. It's not buried somewhere under code enforcement or whatever it might be, that it really just needs to be something that is there so that they're understanding clearly. So that they're not challenged with, last minute or, saying I had no idea because I couldn't find the paperwork and no one told me.
Can
I
can I
do
ask a
think-
point of clarification, too? What is a renter? So, as an example, a neighbor who may have a house, but has a lot of family that comes all the time, they may or may not come down with them. Are they considered renters?
Only if they're taking money from them.
Yeah, not unless they're charging them.
That
Yeah.
is the
Yeah.
distinguishing
Yeah.
factor. That's what I wanted to make sure.
An exchange of monies would be the,
Or not even money, but consideration.
well, yeah.
We don't know whether or not
Well,
that's
yeah,
occurring.
that,
been-
that they may not know.
We may not know.
Hey, some of the dinners in this
We're not
town
going to go that
get
crazy.
you more than rent.
But, I mean, to
Thank you.
try to speed it up and bring it back to, your question, the biggest issue you have is you're trying to make, or not trying to make, but we're trying to look at the realtors in general as their business is real estate. Their business isn't enforcement and collecting the fee. That's the city's responsibility. While the realtors are more than willing to help and do what they can in making sure that the tenants and the owners are following the rules and trying to do what they can't enforce it. We're not enforcement. It's not.
And the thing that drove us to consider that issue was the fact that those numbers, 86 versus 65, that's only for the properties that have 5 or more bedrooms. And it represents 155. There's probably 2,500 properties out there. We have 1,000 licenses given, and I'm assuming, I can't know how many licenses we should be issuing, but 1,000 is not enough, and 2,000 is probably more like it. Now, we're looking for ways for the city to make sure that the people in that unknown group follow the same rules that the people in the known group are.
Sure.
And that's really.
And that's fair for everybody across the board. That's only natural to try to make sure everybody's on a level playing field.
Exactly. So basically, we wanted to get a sense from the real estate industry, how the industry could help the city without becoming an enforcement agency.
Well, information, simplicity, streamlining things, that's how you make it easier for the end user to understand the code, understand what's required of them, and to allow them to follow through and do what they need to.
So Chris, are you saying that there wouldn't, the realtors would not be willing to have something that goes out? I mean, you have, I used to rent all the time, and you have agreements that have to be signed, right?
Yep, yeah, we have to, yeah.
Right?
Yep.
You have to. So why, along with that, can't you just have a simple statement that, attestation that says, I have also, gotten my insurance, my inspection?
That's built into the listing agreement. All of those clauses are in the listing agreement.
Can't we have this as part of that?
Well, Russ, maybe we can have copies available to the rental agencies of the attestation letter.
No, what I'm
Oh,
saying
you're saying it's
is-
a separate one? Oh.
I'm saying just as part of when you rent a property.
We-
I have to sign all kinds of things.
Yeah, we'd certainly wouldn't, if there's an insert that helps that we can put with those listing agreements, that's fine.
Yeah, at least that way, you've taken that extra step.
Yep.
You're not enforcing it necessarily, but you're at least taking that step, and they've attested to the fact that they've done it.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. I'm working on trying to get everything just signed to begin with. Unfortunately, I'm generation after generation of, well, they told me what the rates were, or they emailed them to me, so go ahead and rent it. Well, no, we need the actual listing agreement signed, which they haven't done for 5 years, but now we're making them do it. So, baby steps for me, but I would be more than happy to put something in there that, it's, the other issue you have too is more now so than ever, there's a lot of out-of-area agents that are selling properties in town. The internet and everything else has made it more easy. It's easier for an agent from Marlton or Cherry Hill to come down and sell a property. They don't care about the rental stuff. They sell the property and they're out the door. They're not going to provide the same type of service or packet at closing
Yeah.
that we do. I would like to think that the majority of the offices in town want to do things the right way, and their
Well, I
agents
would hope
submit
that
what they need
even
to.
When you were selling a property, if you knew that it had been a rental and that the person buying it was intended to rent it, that it could also be incorporated, or they should be made known to them at that time.
For
Look,
example,
if you're
I
renting
I usually bring the
today-
packet with me to closing. I usually bring that.
That's really important, because oftentimes people will sell a property, and one of the reasons people buy it is because the seller will say, we're fully booked for the year. That's a selling point. And if that buyer doesn't realize that along with that sale comes a whole new set of regulations, they're gonna be a little bit annoyed that
Right.
they got screwed somehow.
Exactly, right, right.
There's a lot of information that new homeowners will benefit from having, kind of an information packet about, you're moving into Cape May, here's some things you need to know. HPC, how zoning works, where things are, that you have to have your low-speed vehicle registered.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a litany of things that we can put together in a package that the Realtor can deliver, or that we can find a way, when the deed is being registered with the city or whatever, that we can get that packet to them.
Yeah, that's a good idea, like a.
Yeah, like
A
sort of
welcome package.
welcome as a Cape May resident, sort of here are some of the things that you may need to know.
And is there no such thing now?
No. No, no. And I envision something, I mean, it could get, could be something simple, but you could also do something a little bit more sophisticated in making it a little booklet. The problem with that is those things go out, as soon as you finish printing them, they're, sort of done. So you're better keeping it simple, trying to do some two-sided papers, with a nice little cover sheet and just making that
And it could
packet
also be
available.
posted on
Yeah,
the website. Is it?
And I think having a specific link, new Cape May residents, link here, I mean, we all know the questions that you get.
Or not even a residence link, but rental property owner link.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. You keep it simple, as simple as a one-page checklist. No dates, no costs, just
Yeah.
you need mercantile license, fire inspection,
Right.
just a checklist of things to do.
You could have like a barcode that they just scan and brings it right to where they, all the detail behind that would
Right.
be.
Well, this discussion is a little afield from the MTRAC committee. It's consistent with what we think should be done, but it's not really our purview to do that. The city should be doing that. We could recommend that, but our initial concern here is that we want to make sure that everyone is following the law and that we are maximizing revenue to the extent that this statute, this ordinance permits us to do. And we want to enlist the help of the real estate community to help in that effort in a way that doesn't make them an arm of the enforcement office. Because Lou Belasco and his people are in the process of doing this right now. They're cross-referencing real estate listings and all those kinds of things, and they're getting aggressive about that. The council also was pretty clear a couple of months ago that they're not going to, they're never going to be happy with 1,000 licenses in a universe that may have 2,000 licenses. So they're not going to be lenient with anybody who is not obeying the law. They announced that, and so we need to make sure that the folks who are not getting a license are getting all the help they can get and the information they need to get a license. And the real estate community, if they can pitch in and make that point from their perspective, I think that's great. We just need to figure out ways to do it without turning you into the police.
Well,
Yeah.
like I said, I think if you just add it as part of the documents in the rental agreement and just ask them to attest to it.
Yeah, I don't
That
see
way
any harm in that.
You're not policing them, but
We're passing the information along.
correct.
Well, and the information would be twofold. You do have to have a license. And if you do not have a license, the city will find out, and you always have.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, exactly, yep. And the other aspect of this, which I think needs to be focused more on from a perception from the public, this isn't just a money grab either. This is a safety issue. Because when you have the mercantile license, you have fire inspections, you have the proper insurance coverage you're supposed to have.
Well, and you're attesting to the size of your property and the number of people who can safely sleep there, which is, another key factor in this. You're saying that the size of your house is 1,000 square feet, and it sleeps 4.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you're not renting to 12.
Yeah, in this document Crystal gave you, there was a section called, I think it's on the last page, wasn't it, some anomalies?
Oh, it is on the,
Yeah.
next to last page.
Next to last.
Some anomalies. When we cross-reference these, this is Maureen's point, when we cross-reference the licenses with the listings, we found that 24 units were given a license without telling how many square foot they had, which is ridiculous, because that's the whole basis of the license. Now, that's an internal problem the city has to correct. They can't give a license without knowing how many square feet. But in the listings of these properties, these 155 properties, there were 3 of them that advertised that they slept 14 people, and they got a license that said they slept, it was the lowest level license, it was $1,000 or $100, 1,000 square feet. 7 properties said they slept 10, and their license was for 2,000 square feet.
10 to
Pardon me,
23.
10 to 23. And then the 10 properties said that they sleep 17 to 22, and their listing was 15. They could have no more than 15 in that property.
Now, while I would say that I certainly would put my family or people I travel with in houses that small that sleep that many, they did all pass fire inspection. So, I mean, what guideline, I see you have in fine print down here, it says maximum suggested occupancies.
Yeah.
There is no black and white occupancy in the ordinance, other than you can't have any sleeping in the kitchen.
Right,
So, I mean, it's,
or a hallway.
or a hallway. I know there's some caveats in the ordinance of where you can't have any beds, but, I mean, if a homeowner can fit 17 to 22 and 3,000 square feet legally and pass inspections and pass code, again, not something I would recommend to a tenant of mine, and certainly not something I would stay in, but you also have to be careful. You can't control somebody's home ownership and what they do with their property.
So there's 3 people who advertise their property for under 1,000 feet.
They should advertise as a hotel.
They're going to fit 14 people in
14
there?
people.
Part of that was there was an inherent objection to changing the structure of the fees. Okay?
Yeah.
So
Well,
we're-
I wasn't one of the objectors. I agreed it needed to be done.
Yeah, based on sleeping capacity.
So Dennis, Chris has come here today and represents, obviously, his business.
Right.
But we have others that we need to reach out to see if they would be, accepting of including this in their rental packets, this document.
Yeah, what I think probably would be the best way to handle that, because we want to make this as quick as possible,
Right.
is draft a letter saying that we've met with one representative
Right.
of many agencies in
Right.
town, and that these are the kinds of things we would request that you consider as making it part of your
And we'd like to hear any objections prior to and give them a sort of a date to say, yeah,
Don't they
right.
have an association, a realtors association?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was the president of it, but it's a county association. It's not a city
Yeah, it's not a
association.
Local, they don't?
No, it's just based on the county level. And they specifically stay away from local issues when it comes to
Yeah.
governance, because every municipality is different.
Sure. That makes sense. Well, we could draft something like that
Right.
and send it to, we have the agency names and addresses.
How many agencies are there in town?
12?
I want to say 12, yeah, it's 12 or 13. I think one closed up. There's 1 or 2 new ones in town. They fluctuate, but at any given time, you're usually between 12 to 14, I think.
Would you say it's common knowledge about the insurance requirement, or is that something that may have escaped notice?
I don't think common knowledge is a thing anymore. I don't think common sense is that common anymore. I would like to think that it's common knowledge. I know there's people in my office that didn't even know about it until I brought it up, so
So then we,
I would say, if I had to guess, I would say 50% of your local realtors are aware of the insurance requirement.
From your chair as a realtor, where should this letter come from? Or who should it come from? Should it come from MTRAC or should it come from the council?
Well, no, if it can come on city letterhead, it's certainly going to
Come
have,
from Mike Full from the city manager.
yeah, city manager or the city letterhead, yes, that's going to grab more attention than a committee,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
But,
Yeah.
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 you know,
And I
am I supposed
do
to have
want-
personalized stationery already?
I do think, Dennis, just going back to, it's not an issue for this committee, but talking about this kind of a packet or checklist of some key things. I'm going to talk to Zach about it. We could get a working committee, and I'm looking at Mary because I think that, this is the kind of thing that she's been involved with. We could get a working committee and quickly put together a checklist, and then figure out how they could get something on the website. So I don't want to, I won't lose sight of that. I think it's a good working committee, just try and get it up and running to Cape May new homeowner residents. Here's a link. put
Okay,
together some key
well,
things.
Let's
If
give
you
Mary
think,
her first task.
yeah, so Mary, I'm going to talk to Zach, and
Yeah.
then we can figure out getting a couple other people at the table just to put something together. But if you think of the things that should be on there, I think we all kind of threw out a couple things.
Yeah.
Just send me an email of anything you think should be included in it. The, low-speed vehicle registration, we've talked about this, anything else, the liability insurance, but other things, where you go for zoning information, that kind of stuff. They're going to have the new link up soon for construction and zoning permits that the city has got. It's online, going to be online shortly. So for people who are doing projects, construction,
Right.
they'll be able to use that. So I think there's a
Safety
couple.
Stuff that we've talked about,
Yeah, so,
they're
yeah.
required
So I
to
think
have
there's a
helmets.
couple of things we could do and just get them, something up there quickly, one page, but anyway, thanks.
Yeah, the capacity that the council doesn't currently have is a regular public information outreach agenda.
There's no formal sort of marketing committee or even subcommittee, working committee, and that's why I think that these types of things sort of get done, the work gets done, and then they sort of get lost. So we just need to sort of figure out a way, and there's not an office here in the city that sort of takes that on, so. And I'm not sure whether or not Casey has any background or any experience with this, but we might.
Casey who?
Casey, for.
Casey Radigan at the, yeah.
yes, yeah.
Now, she's already overloaded.
Yeah, she,
I don't, I mean,
no, I think Maureen's idea that, I mean, it's not the first time it's been brought up, but there should be a small department within the city that's main objective is to be resident-friendly and informational purposes only, not enforcement, somewhere somebody can walk in and get their questions answered. And then that goes so far as even the construction office, which has been a question for years and years, Bob, you're aware, it's, one single point of contact, not having to talk to HPC and zoning and flood, and, I think that's one area that could be looked at and addressed is having almost like a welcome center for the city. You have a welcome center on Lafayette Street, people come in, they go get their brochures, they find out where to eat, where to stay. There should be a department within the city that's a welcome center for residents. I'm lost, I don't know what to do, help me. What forms do I need, where do I need to go?
right.
Yeah, and the other capacity of public information is to regularly tell the public what just happened,
Right.
as opposed to what's
Well, I mean, most places, have a public information director. It's just not something that has been incorporated here, but I think that if we could at least make an attempt to compile the necessary new homeowner, new property owner document. Well, I think, it's, yeah, a little bit more, but, most places have someone who interfaces, for newspaper and all of those things. It's just not, it's just not, hasn't risen. to that-
Public ambassador.
There is a current news part, which certainly this.
Oh, yeah, no, you're right, yeah.
Unfortunately, that news section on the city website's what they call below the fold.
Is what?
When it comes to print media, you want to be above the fold.
Yeah.
When it comes to social media and web pages, you want to be above the scroll.
You don't scroll down,
Nobody
you
scrolls
don't
down.
find that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's too bad.
Right.
All right, enough of this chit chat. Are we all set?
Yes,
I've
sir.
got stuff I got to talk about.
That's good.
Any other issues? You're going to work this out?
Yeah, I think a small work group can sort of take that.
So is that small work group also going to send a note to the, or draft a note for the city manager?
They're going to draft something to have Mike Ball send.
Separate from that one, yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, just, sort of new citizen packet, new homeowner packet, if you want to call it that. I don't know, we'll come up with something.
Okay, let's touch back on the residential letter. Martin, you got some input on that?
So most of you did receive the
Yep.
third draft, and I think it's pretty close. So Maureen, I heard you loud and clear that we want to make sure that we're stating things clearly. I mean, it's bold and underlined in the first paragraph and bold and underlined in the last paragraph about the under 175 days.
Right, right.
And also, I think it's bolder and even bigger
It is.
type to say I do or I do not intend to offer my property.
Yep.
So I'm not sure what
Well,
else you're thinking about.
so actually, when I'm reading it as someone who doesn't rent their property, I'm looking at this, and it doesn't say to me, and this is perhaps just me, as a property owner, I actually have to complete this.
It
I
says
know
I
it's-
do or I do not intend.
But
It says it right there.
Mary wouldn't have thought, would you have thought you had to fill it out?
Why
Exact-
do
thank
I
you.
have to answer?
Exactly. That is,
It's almost like this is for somebody who may have rented in the past and they want to know whether you're planning on doing
The-
it.
I read it 3 times,
You know?
and I would say to somebody who, and thank you, I would have looked at this and said, I don't need to do this.
I would have looked at this as if I had at one
This is
time
because
rented
I always
maybe,
had
and
to
now I
fill
need
out
to make a
stuff, so
decision.
I just assumed I would have to do it. But maybe, so then just say, every,
is
just have a
required by
first sentence, or
Yeah.
second sentence, every property owner needs to.
Regardless of your,
Of
It
your
does say
rental
that-
status.
It does say that in the first sentence, every property owner.
Okay.
No, but it doesn't say, it says every property
offer
being offered.
offered.
So how about if we include in the title, okay, an open letter to all Cape May property owners,
Every-
renters and non-renters?
Right.
Need to complete the form.
Need to complete the form. You have to be as specific as that.
Yeah, need to complete the
Yeah,
form. Something
agreed.
that says it needs to, I mean, it's good we have different people on this, because I read it differently.
Yeah.
I would complete the form.
But you've rented before.
I have.
Yeah.
And I think, again,
Yeah.
as a non-renter, I would agree with you.
What happens if they don't?
If they don't complete it, we go after them with our new,
Well, that's what I was.
I'm just teasing. No,
We-
that is a
we-
question. What do
we're
you
making-
do?
We've made good progress. We have more than doubled the number of licenses since 2019, okay, without doing anything.
Did this go out already? So-
No,
I'm
no,
curious.
no,
Because
no.
something went out, because I know my cousin had to rush down here, because they were listed as somebody who was renting, and they were not renting, but they had to come down, so
They may
got
have
a-
gotten a compliance letter. Yeah.
Is that what it was?
Yeah. If they had been someone who,
They never rented before.
We
Ever.
know that we will capture more, Chris, with this letter.
Curious why.
We know we won't be at 100%, but the reality is with the insurance requirement now, we have to get to 100%.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt. Maybe I'm missing it on here, but what glaring issue to me, what happens if I rent my property year-round? Where's that addressed on here?
So the short-term rentals are 175 days or less.
Right,
You're not required to get a mercantile license if you are a full-time renter.
but you're required to get the insurance, aren't you? And you're required to get a fire inspection.
Not sure about that.
Yeah, I want to talk with Chris
Okay.
Gillen Schwartz about that, okay?
I mean, the state handles the,
Get-
anybody.
Three units and
over
up,
three units.
right.
We were
Right.
worried
But
about
we don't know
making
about
this more
full-time, Bob.
complex, and we wanted to try to narrow the focus to just this. Because the problem is, this could easily be a 5-page letter. We don't
yeah.
want that. So we're trying to just address the
we're
one
really trying to hone in
Yeah.
on this particular.
on this particular thing.
Yeah.
But I'm
See
with,
what happens.
and then see what happens. And I don't think the council yet is prepared to determine whether there would be fines. Is that right?
Oh, there are,
No, there aren't.
There's fines in place right now. So, and
If they don't complete this form?
no,
Not this.
if you
I'm saying if you
rent your
don't-
house out without a mercantile license,
there are fines in place, yeah.
Okay. But not, if you don't send this form in,
No, there's
I don't
no-
think,
the
I don't think
tax
we're there,
bills?
Russ. I don't
Tax
think that we
bills?
are.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
And on the
I think
website.
that we're taking another step.
right, and I'm with you. And
then
I think that's, I
we
think
take
it's a good
another
thing.
and keep doing this in
Keep
that.
biting the apple.
Russ, there will be, there will be, a certain pocket of residents, elderly, or people who just don't think this is applicable at all or don't have to worry about it. But,
Right.
I don't necessarily think that that's what, they're not the individuals that we, of most concern.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And then the
I wasn't
genesis,
thinking about the ones that don't rent, I was thinking about the ones that rent and don't.
Yeah, agreed, agreed.
So,
Right.
but,
yeah, and the genesis of this all-purpose letter
Yeah.
was because the city previously only sent out notices to the people who had been renting.
Yes, yes.
Which is avoiding
Right.
the central
Yeah.
issue.
And Dennis, I'm going to incorporate this when we're ready into a Village Green newsletter.
Oh, that's good.
Okay? So I can, get that a document in some kind of a PDF form or a Word document and make sure it goes out to them, as well as directions and instructions if they need any also.
And for the real estate agent's purposes, we could even reduce this further because they don't need a lot of this information.
Right.
We could have a very brief one-page thing that said, this is what you should give to your customers.
There's going to be a learning curve with this. So I guess, a question I have is whether there should be a follow-up letter to the first one for, first off, look, we want to have 100% compliance right out of the gate. We're not going to have 100% compliance right off the bat. So, but if we follow that up with a second letter that highlights, hey, that this needs to be done. In addition, to address the issue that Chris had brought up, because people's circumstances change over the course of the year. Part of it is, look, we want people to start to think that this is something that they need to get done. One, it may capture, and Chris, I don't know what percentage that is, that change over the course of the year. It may be just a handful.
Not many.
On the other hand, it puts.
I was just playing devil's advocate.
What's that?
Just playing devil's advocate, but yeah.
Yeah, so, but look, it happens, and it's an issue for us to bring up. If anything, we want people to start to think about that this is a continuous thing. It's not just, I do it once at the beginning of the year, but always need to be aware of it. And candidly, with your community as well, as far as with the realtors, because if you say that 50% may not necessarily be sure what needs to be out there, for instance, with the insurance component, look, that's the, every realtor is dialed in and focused on that particular issue. We're talking about people who are buying properties, may not be, but they may be savvy as far as renting properties, or they may have picked up a property and like, I'm renting it, what do I do? And
Well,
they
in
may not
Village
really-
Green alone, we had almost a 25% turnover of homes in a 3-year period. Yeah, we saw over 100 new property owners in 3 years, from 2019 to like 2022.
Dennis, is there any way when they send these things in that we have a checklist to,
Against the property address?
who complied and who hasn't
Yeah,
yet complied?
yeah. I mean, I would
Then
think
we
that,
would go after or when I say go after, but do the follow-up letter, like was suggested to the ones that.
Well, yeah, that could be a way to do
I
it.
don't know, I'm trying to figure
Yeah.
out how we put pressure on the ones that didn't.
I think there's even a natural cycle to it, too, because we talked about, at the last meeting, maybe sending it out with the water bill. So, okay, we do the water bill, they go out, we know that they're on a regular schedule that they go out, so we hit, one notice goes out with one water bill, and then we follow it up with the next one.
right.
Yeah, I think it could go with another water bill, and
Yeah,
maybe like
that's
the
a
summer,
good idea.
the summer.
Because it would give
like
you
the
enough
July bill,
time to go
right.
through and
Say,
make sure you did the checklist.
Back in January, we told you, we provided you with some new information. Here's some more information for you that you can consider, so we can keep furthering the education of the homeowners.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the goal. I guess the question too is there any consequence of not doing this? I mean, clearly,
If you're
Until you get
renting,
caught, you're-
yeah, if you're renting, there are, in the ordinances, there is a
Almost
penalty.
every time the water bill goes out, just not the next.
If you're just someone like
I
us.
don't know that I want to put it in everyone, because
The consequence
Yeah.
is when the staff in the city routinely monitor the licenses and inspect properties.
right?
Then they're going to get caught, then they're going to get a fine.
Well, we ought to probably just make a comment about that. We prefer to have this done, upfront versus having to penalize
Yeah, you
you,
don't have
so
it.
that they know that there is a
No, take it out.
consequence, right? I mean,
Maybe
right
that-
now, it
maybe
doesn't
that
look
could
like
be-
there's a consequence to
Put
it.
it in there nicely. but
Nicely,
let's
right,
Right.
Well, in the second notice, you could put that in there,
true.
because this is a
Yeah.
very positive approach.
correct. It was in the original version, and
Right.
we as a committee said, you know what, let's
That's reasonable.
not have
Because
too
also,
heavy a hand this
because
first
also
time.
we're all keeping in mind that we want everyone to attest regardless of their status. So, you don't want to be too heavy-handed, first time out the gate.
Focused on safety and
Yeah.
fairness,
Yeah.
Right.
and I think that's the right message.
And responsibility for the
I think the idea of the check marks to make sure we get it back, the only question will be
Okay,
then
yeah,
is, are we going to have the address of the house on these, so we know when it comes back that that address was in fact, you know what I mean? Like, actually have the address on the form so we can check off that,
I see, but yeah, good point. So at the bottom, there may be a line that needs to be added that someone has to fill in their property, their Cape May property address.
The address is
Yeah.
listed here.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay.
And that's
Yeah.
intentional.
Okay, all right.
Should we send perhaps that draft letter to the realtors?
I have no problem with doing that. I think the next step is.
As an
I think we.
As an FYI.
The city clerk's office has asked for a copy of it, so I'd like to send that to them with these latest revisions, okay?
Yeah.
I want to run it through Chris Gill and Swartz to make sure that we're not saying anything we shouldn't say.
Mm-hmm.
And then we need, I think, city council to approve it.
Can I also ask you to
Yes.
send it to Mike Voll also as
City
the city
manager
manager?
is the
yeah.
only one really has to approve it.
Yeah,
He's,
I think the clerk, the city clerk
he
wants it.
handles the day-to-day.
Yeah, but I think they want to see it just because they want to see what we're obligating
My
them.
intention was for this to be coming from the city council.
Yes.
So if it's coming out from them, I would think that they would want to see it. Plus, they're the ones that asked us to do this.
Well, if it's on city letterhead signed by the city manager, then inherently you have city council at the top of the letterhead.
Right.
But just real quick,
Just
just,
trying to think about ways so we can give heads up to people.
Yeah, but this whole discussion is now, it's moved to the administrative level
Yeah.
rather than policy level.
Martin, just real quick, you said it says address on here. I see where the address is supposed to go, but just in the, trying to keep it simple, it doesn't say address on here. I wouldn't fill out my address on here. It says signature.
Say property address at
Maybe
the
it got cut
bottom.
off on yours. It's on the
Might
very
have.
bottom. Yep, it got cut off.
Okay, then I apologize.
That's my
Now I'm
fault.
missing it. Okay.
That was my copy.
Okay, never mind then.
And I'm going to just be, again, working in the hospital, we've dealt with a lot of different people. The question is the property address where I live now? Or is it the property address truly in Cape May?
The Cape May property
It's the
address.
rental property, like, it's the
That- that
rental
is-
property,
that
not
is a good-
where
But it's not the
maybe
rent-
I live
no,
in
it's-
Cape
It's not the
May.
rental
Sure, it's not the
property.
rental
The
property.
rental property, not,
Yeah,
No.
it's any property.
You
owner.
want my Cape May property address,
Oh, right.
because I don't rent.
So Mary, I did
but I
put,
could own a house in Cape May as well as rent another house in Cape May.
Oh, that's true.
So I probably want to make sure that
Some of the,
that's
so
what
you'll
I,
be getting a copy of this with every property that has water.
Has a name on it.
And a name.
Because the water bills aren't combined.
No.
In fact, I have to send 2 chechecks and 2 things for the same house.
So if you own 5 houses, you should be sending back 5 letters.
So, another question, while we're on this topic then, so my property is a legal duplex, but I only have one water in and out.
yeah.
Do I intend to rent it, or do I not intend to rent it? Because I live in half of it and I rent the other half. Which box do I check?
It's part of your non-compliance.
They're going to be that last 5% we try and catch someday.
how about if I have a property that has 3 units, it's under the state?
If they're listed as properties, yeah, you get a letter from each of them, if they have a water bill. Hi, Stace.
Hi, I have a question about that water bill.
Yeah.
So isn't there places such as Marquis Lafayette where they don't get water bills, that it just goes one water bill in? And that's not divided into each of the places? So they wouldn't all get the letter
Oh, you
then?
mean for the.
All the hotels are getting mercantile licenses already.
Right, but remember we were talking about they were individual ones?
Yeah.
But the
Right.
condo
But
hotel
for
situation.
Sandpiper, Marquee, they don't get, that's one water bill for the entire 52
Right.
units. So
So they-
those owners don't get a water bill.
Yeah, they don't get a mercantile license for each unit.
They do now. We changed that in
Yeah,
the
we
ordinance. The
changed-
condo hotels now get a mercantile license for each individual unit. That was one of the big loopholes that was in there.
Right.
Yeah.
So that requires a separate communication to someone who is in charge of the marquees.
The property manager.
Yeah, the property manager. Is that scenario
More of a
anywhere
one-off,
else?
isn't it?
Or is,
Well, this is there's about 5 of them.
You've got Summer Station, Marquis de Lafayette,
Rock condo,
Sandpiper,
the Rock,
Cape Rock?
Cape Rock.
Cape Rock.
No, Cape Rock.
No, they're all individually metered. They're all individually metered. They're not a condo hotel. They're all condos and they're all individually metered. There are condos out there. I can't think on the top of my head where they were conversions, say large single-family conversions, where they all pay a percentage based on their square footage, but that would be a unique situation.
That's over here,
Which one?
like at the church, isn't there condos there?
Yeah, what about the apartment building the 2 of them on Washington? The ones by the PNC Bank? How are those?
Those are, no, that would be, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there'd be a lot of, you'd have to look individual, but
Okay.
you're probably capturing 95% of the owners if you send it with the water bill. The other 5 or 10%, I'm sure city or you guys could figure out another point in time.
Okay.
I think for the purposes of this discussion, let's just leave it at, if you get a water bill, you get a letter.
Okay.
And then we can figure out who
Yeah,
you
we'll need to work on their developing an address list that's better than anything that's available now. I never got the letter about the water testing, for example, even though
Yeah, you
I,
know, that came in, that was like a blow-in from the postal service. That wasn't even posted.
well, didn't get it in either place.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
okay.
Well, can we move on? Anybody else on this issue? All right,
Thanks for the input.
all right. You've
So you're
got-
going to version 4, right?
You'll get that around, I think just in.
Russ, you don't even know how many versions I buried.
No, there are no more comments. We're done.
Just in terms of.
We're done, right?
Well, we're done for now, but let's target the next council meeting for the final draft of this letter.
So that would be December 20th.
Right. So, because we need to get that in the flow of things as soon as possible. So let's make that the drop dead date, all right? Okay. Okay, let's move on to another issue, which,
May I be excused?
yeah, sure.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. That was a.
Thank you.
A
That's
very
very
helpful
helpful, Chris.
presentation. Thanks, Chris.
I learned about VRBO that I didn't
Yeah.
know.
Now, I hope you got this. Did everybody get one of these? Let me see.
Yes.
Okay,
I'll look over your shoulder.
okay, I'll put it right here. And this is.
that your
this
double?
is Russ. This is Russ's favorite topic.
It is.
Because we are finally getting back to the discussion of mercantile fees and whether or not they should be changed, and if so, how much. So what I did was, I got a print off of the latest of the list of mercantile licenses issued by the city this year, and separated into separated several categories. And I pulled out the category that I'm calling accommodations, because there's only three, well, now there's 8. There's 6 residential residencies categories. There's hotels and motels, and there's guest houses and tourist houses. Those are the 3 licenses that are issued to accommodations people, separate and apart from restaurant, retail, services, everything else. Those are the only 3 categories of mercantile license they get. Now, I went back and I looked at the revenue that was generated in this past budget for each of the elements of that sector. And you can see by this chart that residential rentals generated $60,000 of residential rentals, about $150,000 of revenue. And that's because we have the current rates, the graduated categories and so forth. The other group, the hotels, motels, and guest houses, generated $60,000, and that's because their charge is $35 per room. And as you can see by that second chart, the revenue per accommodations units was, for our houses, our residential rentals, for each unit was generating $142 for each unit. The hotels and motels were generating $32 per unit. So if you compare these 2 segments of the accommodations industry, one of them is current and up to date with respect to inflation and the economy, because we just did it. The others have never been updated. They're existing in a rate that was created 20 years ago.
Was it 20 years ago?
Yeah. Now, then I also went to the federal government and pulled out the inflationary rates since 2012. That's 11 years. The average inflationary rate was 3% per year, except for the last couple of years.
When it was 9.
Now it's 7 and 0.7. But the $32 has never been subjected to any effect of the inflation rate,
So Dennis, just to play devil's advocate,
even
one
though
of the,
everything else is.
yeah, I just want to make sure that we are keeping in mind the occupancy tax increase, from the, and I'm just going to talk from, working, at a small B&B. There's a hit that occurred. Now, it's a pass-on, understood, but the fact of the matter is, there was some feedback that I think that the city heard on the occupancy tax increase. It has value, obviously, but it just occurred. And I'm not suggesting we don't look at it, but I think that we just need to recognize and be sensitive that if,
I'm totally sensitive.
yeah, okay, all right,
A lot of people aren't going to like this.
right. But I think that we should preface it by saying, and we recognize that we just increased
Yeah, but-
the occupancy tax, et
But we also
cetera.
need to recognize that our task is not to make people happy.
If we can do what we can do and make
If we
people
can
happy,
convince
that's
them to
better.
be happy with what we recommend, that's fine. But
No, I recognize that. I'm just trying to,
when I look at an
yeah,
economic profile.
Right.
It says for everything that, in this city which has been subjected to an inflationary cycle, if you look at the chart,
No,
you'll see that since 2012, the total increase in the inflation rate is 42%.
so the other way that,
Everything-
okay.
So when I go into a restaurant or a bar and I get a Bloody Mary, it's not what it was in 2012.
And so my point was going to be, look, if we should go back and try and get what an average hotel room rate was in Cape May in 2012, and compare with the rates that are being offered right now. So you may have paid in 2012 $175 a night for, a nice accommodation in season. Now, more than likely, you're paying $295 or
Yeah,
$325 for the same thing.
I don't think that connects, because.
No?
No, what I think is that the effective inflation, I'm assuming it's going to be in that. But I'm also thinking about the fact that this city's budget has been annually subjected to inflationary impact. And we're looking at revenue to support city services.
Okay, so then the other way that you could look at it is, what was the cost for your employee base, health and welfare in 2012, compared to what we have to do now to service an increase in tourism where we,
can do
yeah.
that.
All right, so if we were 30,000 tourists in 2012, and now we're averaging 50,000 or 60,000 during season, and that's, we've had to increase staff, then,
Sure, I
okay,
can-
all right.
I have a chart that does that.
Okay.
But I think I'm going to go back to Russ's point, is that from meeting number one, which was, let's take a look at these mercantile fees and how they have not kept up with inflation.
Agree with you there. I just think that part of this, sometimes is also about the story in order to be able to get people to appreciate that we just didn't look
Oh,
at the
no,
fee and increase it. I know you know that.
I don't have a problem with
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
We'll spin the
Yeah.
story
Okay.
to a way that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Dennis,
If it hasn't been changed in 12 years, then we need to change it. The question
20,
is how much.
20.
Right.
And then also,
I went back, but if you take a look at, to your point, Martin, if you take a look at the gross increase in 12 years, it's 42%. If I applied 42% onto
$35.
$35,
Right.
it's $12.80.
Okay, all right. So fair enough, you're rounding up to $50 is what you're trying to
Or
get
if you
to.
want to
Right.
if you want to give it a 20% increase, just to nod to the notion of inflation, then it becomes $6.40. And it's $6.40 one time for that room, spread over a 4-month season of that
Sure.
room being
Well,
rented.
right.
What's
Yeah.
it going to come to?
Yeah,
Cents?
right, yeah, right. No,
I want to, but we had the hotel rooms, but I think we have to take into consideration too, hotel rooms aren't what they used to be. They're not just one room anymore. Now they're becoming suites
A lot
and
of them
things.
are. A lot.
And I think there should be a difference in fee on what we're looking at.
And also, too,
It's almost like the size of a house that we had looked at.
I was just going to say that a hotel room is not a 5-bedroom house. So that's not a real clear comparison. But, I understand that. My point here is to say, let's start a discussion on what this inflationary rate had to be. Let's change it now, in this budget cycle, right now, and make a recommendation to the city to change those rates for the accommodations industry and for the food and beverage industry. Because their charge on seats, I don't have a chart for this, but their charge on seats is $7. And it's been $7 for a long time. And not only is it $7 for the indoor seating, but now they have outdoor seating.
the second half of the recommendation should be to not wait 12 years. I mean,
well,
all of these
we've said
things
that,
talk about
we've said that before.
On an annual
Yeah.
basis.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, just so you, for travel lodging, I just looked up these statistics over the last 12 years. It's been an average of 2.54% per year. A $100 room in 2010 would be $135 today. That's 12 years.
Right,
So I'm not saying it's specifically for Cape May.
Right,
But
right.
it's not
Yeah.
that far off.
right, right.
But, and I agree, I mean, we've talked about this before, it needs to have a regular cycle for review.
Exactly.
Right.
So we don't.
Yeah.
We don't.
We've
have
talked
this.
about that for contracts
And
and
by the
everything.
way,
right.
that notion was incorporated into the ordinance, which requires the city manager every year to do an analysis of the fees and whether or not there's sufficient revenue.
Yep.
And here's a suggestion.
Yeah,
We've
a
done that
suggestion, right,
analysis.
right.
It's not sufficient to revenue. If you raised it by 40%, you generate $24,000, which would pay a lot of the cost for a clerk to control the,
And monitor what's going on.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, so it's basically paying, but everything is ballooning in inflation, except some things aren't. And they're stuck in these little nooks and crannies of the ordinances. And
Yep.
it's-
Oh, I agree with doing it. I'm just sensitive sometimes to what you hear from, saying that you're recognizing and putting the numbers out there in front. When people hear the percentages first, oftentimes, Dennis.
Well, that's what we do. Maureen.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just trying to play devil's advocate. When it comes down to only $6, that's a big difference in a conversation as opposed to someone hearing 40%. That's all.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
that's what we do.
Right.
That's why we have PowerPoints.
Yeah, and I want to make a point, too, that it was the B and Bs, or not B and Bs, the whole house rentals
Yeah.
that also got hit with the 3%
Yeah.
that weren't there
We're trying to
before,
make it fair.
along with the
Right,
other
right,
stuff,
right.
so.
Yeah, and this is another issue of equity, which is another point we need to make, that why should this particular segment of that industry be frozen in time when every other piece of it is being escalated
Right.
to inflation?
Well, certainly, I think for the seats, because they didn't even get hit with an occupancy tax increase.
Seats.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Restaurants.
The inflation, we're talking about one little segment.
Mm-hmm.
You got to think of the whole corporation, the city of Cape May.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is,
Yeah, and it isn't even just normal inflation, it's just health benefits business.
Yeah.
That's not normal
20%.
That's not
inflation.
normal inflation, no.
That's
not.
ridiculous.
No, that's not.
So that's a
Right.
need for new dollars.
Right.
We can't confront a need for new dollars and allow whole segments of our economic profile.
right.
No, large-scale organizations could not,
Has city council determined what the average wage increase will be for employees for the city?
That's contractual.
Oh, it's all contractual?
yeah, it's,
A lot
yeah,
of it is.
a lot of it
There's
is,
3
yeah.
or 4
Doesn't matter what the inflation rate is?
No, and the health and benefits is not even something that it's factored in. It's a purchase, yeah.
So can I also, just to help me understand, how does a place like, and I just think about the Mission Inn, who was originally a bed and breakfast, right, has individual rooms, I'm sure don't get an individual water bill, so to that discussion, but also to this discussion. But I think now they're pretty much renting out just like a room as in like an Airbnb. It's not being run as a bed and breakfast. Where does that come into all this? Like,
You mean, I thought that was a privately owned home?
no,
Oh.
It was sold.
Oh,
they sold and they're renting.
No, I knew they sold. I didn't know that they were doing like room rentals.
Yeah,
Does that
my
help?
understanding is when somebody had asked about, I went on and they actually were renting out individual
Rooms.
rooms. I want to say it could be Airbnb, I'd have to look, this was
Yeah,
maybe about, it was
okay,
after
yeah,
Wendy sold it.
yeah.
But I was kind of curious,
Yeah.
now that I'm listening to these, about how do you handle an occupancy on that, and how do you handle the,
It's a rental unit.
It's-
So the building is a
the
rental.
building
unit.
is a rental?
And then it sleeps has a certain number of square feet being rented out. That's what triggers the mercantile license.
Well, it would actually be, I think it might be a little bit challenging in this situation, Marty, because if it's a private home and somebody decides to rent a room,
That becomes a dwelling unit.
And it becomes, when we understand what the,
square footage.
yes, but
Yeah,
the
it's-
fire
then it's like
inspector
50
said,
square feet
when
or
people
something.
start renting just rooms, there's a lot more requirements when it comes to fire.
Yeah,
And
that's
that
what I-
sometimes they don't really qualify, because as a bed and breakfast, certain things are overlooked, but when you're renting rooms as just a room,
Sure.
there's more fire
Right.
requirements
right.
that are
So,
involved.
so what I'm saying to you, Mary, I don't know how, in the process that we've described, we would capture that scenario.
And that's what I'm asking, even for this
I don't know how you
occupancy, is it
would.
occupancy by room, by,
I don't
Look into
know.
that. I'll look into that.
yeah, I'm just kind of curious.
I don't know how you would
I'll
capture that
look
one,
into
yeah,
it,
yeah.
see how it fits.
I mean, I'm sure it's not a unique situation, but
No,
I don't
have
know
a
how,
feeling there's probably others that are doing the same
Yeah,
thing.
you better believe it.
yeah.
Well, it's actually, the history of Cape May, that's how it started. People were renting rooms.
Right, right,
You know,
yeah,
That was 180 years ago.
right.
There's still a lot of rooming houses.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I guess people are revisiting that.
All right, so, not to short circuit the discussion, but is the committee interested in recommending to council that these two mercantile fees be increased in this year's budget by 40%?
I guess the question is, should we do it all in 1 year?
I say
Well-
yes.
Yeah, I'd say yes, too. You're talking about $12.80.
Right.
I know, I agree.
But the second part of the recommendation is that they be subjected now to the same thing that the residential rentals are. The mercantile licenses have to be reviewed annually for their sufficiency.
And keeping with cost of living
Well, there
adjustments.
should be a trigger, I think, built into it. So when the inflation goes up, it triggers.
So you attach a COLA to it, and you automatically require
Yeah.
that there be a COLA review.
There you go.
For these kind of things. And Dennis, I think as long as, I think you make the recommendation to council
Yeah.
and allow council to determine whether or not, Russ, to your point.
That's
you
all we
know,
ever do.
You're right.
Because if you
Yeah.
leave it up
If-
to, say, one person, even the city, it somehow gets overlooked, and then you miss a whole year. Yeah.
But I like the fact that presenting it to council with a number and a reason behind it, because that way they're not going, I don't know, what do you think, $1? You know, like this way it gives it,
Exactly why this is
A reason
important.
for it,
yeah.
because-
Right.
Because we've done. this
Some
is
of
a-
the points that you've spoken at here today, I mean,
Has it been 12 years or 20 years?
Well, I only have data for 12 years, but these haven't changed in 20 years.
Because I mean, that needs to be an important point.
Yeah.
For sure. The other thing is, so what does this go towards? What will this help offset?
general.
what it normally does as a mercantile fee. Fees can only be put towards what the work is done for that paperwork. Software, you know, all the things that we put money into.
Enforcement.
Enforcement.
Code enforcement.
I'm just saying that-
City clerk's
Yeah,
office, yeah.
yeah. The paper,
part of the
the
rationale.
paper, this,
Yeah.
you know.
Trying to build it
Yeah.
back to the rationale.
But that's all that
Yep,
it should be used for.
right.
It's not supposed to be generating income.
No.
It's supposed to be as
Offsetting
offsetting
expenses.
Offsetting
expenses.
expenses.
Revenue,
Right.
it's revenue,
To offset expenses.
yes.
Right, yeah.
Offsetting expenses, yeah.
That's why I'm saying, so on the expense side, if it's been 20 years, what expenses have increased
The whole budget's increased.
that,
That was my point. How many more of everything do we have compared to 2012? And if we have that
I
information.
have a
Yeah,
chart on that.
and that's all. And,
Staggering.
and to say, this just goes to offset the expenses that have increased in city, administration.
exactly.
For
That's
these.
where I was
Yeah,
going.
yeah, yeah.
Everybody
now-
that lives and breathes.
So we'll make that recommendation. I'll write that up and pass it around for your approval. The second issue that I want to talk about, it's 5:30, we're running a little bit late, but this came out of some budget review and analysis that I was doing with the city. And it deals with the beachfront. As you know, let me pass this around so you.
Do I have it?
you
Did you
have-
send it
I
around?
did send it
Yeah, that
around.
came in.
Well, then I have it.
This is something we did a couple of months ago.
This one?
Yeah, that's it, that's on. Every year, the city rents the beach. Every year, the city rents the beach to,
This is it.
you got it?
Yeah, he's got it.
Okay. Every year, the city rents to the hotels along the beach, beach space to run their operations, put out their tents and their chairs and what have you. And that sheet I just sent around to you is a summary of what gets paid. If you look at that sheet and you extract the Sager beach rentals from it, it generates about $100,000 a year in revenue. Yes. Yeah. No, it's not yearly. It's not a yearly.
I don't know if we're, before cities used to have like the whole beach. Now all of a sudden Congress Hall has their beach, but I'm not sure what they actually pay, because it's not, I don't think it goes in the bidding process.
No, it's a contractual,
But it should be put out to bid.
Well, does Congress Hall have riparian rights? That's their property.
According to, there's only
no,
one
they
person
don't.
has rights to the beach.
That's the Grand.
No, it's somebody else who owns it.
The Ocean
Bob
Club?
Fight?
Well, Bob White has, but it's,
I mean, he owns beach.
by where the next area the scene is, suppose that's the only person who has the rights to it. These other places, with the Grand, I think
The Grand is the one that
I thought
doesn't.
the Grand
they
is the
don't
one
pay.
that,
They don't pay. Yeah, that's right.
You know, I think it to be complying, I'm thinking that it all should go out to bid. And it should be
Well, okay,
option, I mean, just because somebody has a place across the beach doesn't give them the automatic.
well,
right
actually,
to have that.
it is put out to bid.
Not that beach isn't,
Yeah, right, yeah, it is.
only the Stegers Beach area. Well, there's
No, each of the parcels is put, there's A through I parcels, and they're put out to bid.
they are put out
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
different hotels.
yeah. They are put out to bid. The only people who bid on them are the motels in front of that parcel, but,
Because at one time, I know Stegers Beach was had like the whole beachfront.
yeah, that's a separate, Graham and Steger are separate from the hotels.
No, I'm not talking Stegers Beach, not talking Stegers Beach.
Oh, you're talking about
I'm talking
Steger's?
Stegers Beach service.
That's a bid too.
That used to be all out, they used
Yeah,
to have the whole
it
beach.
still is. It still is.
And then they should be part of the same bidding process as what is in front of.
They are.
Okay.
They are.
Dennis, I'm sorry, could you orient us to what is the numbers in the column next to Reynolds, Brand, Lanier, like the property names?
Okay.
It says 298, we don't know what those numbers are.
Okay, that refers to the zones.
go to the right of the page.
You see the zones on the other side over here? Parcel A?
Did you,
Yeah, we have that, but 2368 next to Steger Beach Service. What is 2368?
That's the aggregate. He has a bid for every one of the beaches he's on.
ADEF.
Yes.
Who are you talking about?
A, D,
Steger?
E, F.
Well, the reason he does is because they're at the street ends,
No, it's okay.
which the city owns.
All right, it's okay. Their number 2368 is for all of those beach parcels, A through H, all right?
Okay, so a beach park.
And what I did there on that chart was to show what each of the parcels generated in terms of revenue. They're all different, but they generated a total of $94,000.
Yes, I see that,
Okay.
yes.
Now, when you go down to the Addis, the Montreal, the Ocean, the Cape Coachman, and Cape Management,
Right.
their beach parcels are listed next to their number. And that's what they paid, that's what they bid, and that's what bid was accepted. So it's 20, 20, 17, 50, 25, 20,
What is that based on?
whatever they want to bid.
No, we can, as a council, say there has to be a minimum bid.
Yeah, and the minimum bid, if you notice on this chart, on this side over here, here's the minimum bids.
Yeah,
And they,
we don't have that part. We only got this part.
No, you had to print it out together.
okay, all right.
Yeah, actually, it actually was part of the sheet. It had to be printed together.
Yeah. Okay, now you're back on.
So is each parcel a different bid? Like?
Yes.
So depending on the
Yes.
size of the beach, is that,
Right.
what's the rationale for the location?
If it's closer to town would be more
More money.
valuable, right?
Yeah,
I would think.
yeah. Now, separate and apart, understand this, separate and apart from this issue, because there are issues connected with this process. One of them being they've taken over the whole beach, and they're not supposed to. They're taking over,
That's not our issue, though.
that's not our issue. Our issue is this, and this was only preface to what I really want to talk about. Our issue was, in the budget discussions we had last week, it's clear that the city owns properties along the beach that are theoretically valuable, and they're not generating any revenue, or they're generating such little revenue that it's almost not worth having them. I speak in particular of the building that houses the city operations and the Mermaid Restaurant. That property pays no property taxes because it's city-owned. I think what we need to consider is going along that entire beachfront in those zones, in those coastal zones, S1, that have properties which are owned by the city, which could be sold for revenue.
Sold or rented? Sold or rented?
No, sold for revenue and taxed as private property. Because they're not paying property taxes now, because we own them. So if you took those and in
So give me an
particular,
example of that.
the Mermaid Restaurant,
Oh, okay.
city owns that, those folks rent that space.
It's bid out, yeah.
There's no property tax paid on it, and it's sitting, there's a chart.
But why wouldn't, well,
Here, let me get a chart for you.
no,
Here it is, right here. I sent this one to you, too. So
all right, well, I have it then.
You got that?
Yeah, don't tear it out of your book. I
I
don't
won't.
want to have that.
Here to go this way. That piece of property is,
That's the one where it's paying the seat fee, is that the one we're looking at?
Well, what they get in rental is probably more than they would get in taxes, though, isn't it?
no, not at all.
They wouldn't, you think they get more than 35,000 in taxes a year?
Because here's why. Let me give you an example. Let's take, there's a property, all know the property on the beach, which is owned by the city. It's got the lunch counter, the food thing back by the cove. It's got bathrooms in it, and there's a restaurant there. Okay, that's owned by the city. That's property, if you look at this list you have here,
I don't think I have
that's
that.
property, block number 1,000,
That list.
lot 14, at 100 Beach Avenue. Its net value is $2,648,000.
Is that the actual Cove Restaurant? Is that what you're?
No, 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 this is at Broadway,
It's on the beach.
that where the
Broadway?
bathrooms are.
Oh,
at
yeah,
Broadway.
yeah, okay.
There's a little,
Yep,
on the ocean side,
Yep,
there's a
I know
restaurant,
exactly where you're
and
at.
there's
Yeah.
bathrooms. That's appraised, according to our tax records, at $2,648,000. Now, if the city could, and we need legal review on this, obviously, but if the city could sell that piece of property at just that price, $2.8 million, that's, A, it's revenue, and B, that 2.8 becomes taxable as a private property, which generates a lot of property taxes per year.
What, how much property tax do you think it could generate?
10% of that, that's the property tax,
What, so,
$290,000.
Is that it's not a buildable lot.
yeah, it's not buildable, and you have our bathrooms in it, so what would we do with the bathrooms?
Our bathrooms.
I mean, there's certain things that you need on the beachfront that we're short, and that,
the city might, if somebody's going to buy a piece of property for $2.8 million, they're going to want to do something pretty,
With it.
And it's just pending legal review. And it's pending what anybody could do with that property. That needs to be studied, for sure. The issue right now is not, do we sell the beach? The issue is, do we take the properties that we own that are already on the beach and already occupied by buildings which are generating no revenue except rent?
But shouldn't the
Can we
rent,
sell them?
shouldn't the rent take into consideration taxes that
Right.
would be paid? It's rent in lieu of?
the problem is, we haven't been able to find people that wanted to
That's right.
work it as a business, is what it comes down to.
Several years
But
ago, we had a problem with,
that people kind of left without
they don't want to rent.
paying all the rent. Right, but, I think we have to look at the function of that building, because it's bathrooms,
Well, not only that, but like the beach taggers there, Ricker's
there.
old store. Where are you gonna put them now? You gotta build
Well-
someplace for them.
Well,
and there's also the idea we're putting in bathrooms in that
I
area,
know,
too.
that's the other thing I was just gonna say, that's where they're gonna put the bathroom.
Well, maybe the Mermaid is a little clearer example. So that was just renewed, the lease, for 5 years. No one else bid on it, so therefore, we're not getting market value for that property. That's where, that piece of property's got to be worth, I don't know, do you have a number for that? $5 million?
no, the Monterey property, you'll laugh. It's $128,000.
What?
It's on the books for 120.
Yeah.
Wow.
But what I'm saying is, if the city doesn't, the city is not in the business of owning real estate. The city's in the business of running the city.
Well, that's true, but when you have a resort, you need some of these properties to operate.
Because we have a convention hall that we own, right? I mean, there's certain things, we need the bathrooms. It's not like we're just working out of City Hall. We're working out of other
A lot of
areas.
them are parcels on the beach that they had to buy when they did the
jetty.
yeah,
Yeah, when they did the rock.
seawall.
I would imagine a place like that, though, you would get a restaurant, like an upscale restaurant
Why
like
didn't
Primal
someone
did.
else bid on it?
Well,
Why
but-
did they-
But that's not up
did
for
someone-
sale.
Because
No, I'm
they
talking about
were
where the Mermaid, why didn't someone else bid
Because
on it?
it was only offered as a
Rental,
property.
that's, yeah, I'm thinking that would be a perfect, that would probably be an ideal spot for an
We
upscale
had,
restaurant.
there's some discussion that, maybe it's something that we should do, maybe not rent it as a restaurant. Maybe the city should be looking at it as changing what they want to rent it as.
Just as a point, is Primal, is that location owned by?
Hold it.
I just want to know, is it?
You're getting to the next point. You're right. Hold on.
It's
At the bottom of the list are 4 properties. You see the properties at the bottom of the list?
I don't have
I
it.
had that attachment, but there were lots of pages on it. so
I don't have it.
didn't print the whole thing out.
Okay. There's 4 properties
my
on the
property.
beach, which are currently privately owned. 406 Beach, and that's the Prime Restaurant, whatever.
Primal.
Well, it's actually, the arcade
And the arcade.
and Primal are owned by Taberzios.
The assessed value of that property is $3,314,000. There are 3 other properties owned on the beach, and that's the complex around the Fudge Shop and all of that, the Diner McGlade's Restaurant. The total value of those 3 properties is almost $7 million. Now, so privately owned pieces of property on the beach, with the Beach Drive address, are appraised at $9.8 million. We have properties sitting on the beach which have businesses on them. We own them, we're getting rent from them, and some of them are appraised at $128,000. Okay, so my point is, I see those parcels as a twofold revenue source, a sale price and a tax base. Now, the issue is, which of them is doable? This is the list of all of them. Which of them is doable? But going forward, you could take any one of these things and build a bathroom at each and every down street, because we own all that property.
No,
Well, first of all, it's like a one-shot in the arm.
No, it's an ongoing shot, because they pay property taxes every year.
Well, maybe you're right.
but I still think what we're getting in rent is basically what we could get in taxes.
I mean, if we feel that we could get more, you could test it, but as one of my mentors shared with me many, many years ago, the value of something is what someone is willing to pay.
And I think Russ, this is where we, as a city, don't do our due diligence, in that when something comes up for bid, we got to really advertise it. We're not. Somebody goes, oh, that was for bid? I didn't know about it. I called, some people complained that they called City Hall and they asked for an application, didn't get the application, and missed the bid process.
So
So there's
So
things
close-
as a
it's almost
city.
like a closed bid.
Right. So as a city, these are things, we shouldn't be going out to bid in February for this building. It should be, it should be advertised
But
a
that's-
lot that
hold
we're
on.
going out to bid.
That's off the point, Stace, because that whole thinking is, how can we rent it, how can we get more money for the rent for this property? But if you sit and you look at that piece of property, everybody walks by it every day, and they all say the same thing. This place is a dump.
Well, I put it this way, Dennis, though, if we,
Nobody's going to invest in improving any property when they only rent it every year.
Well, Dennis, maybe the city should invest in fixing the property up and really build something there and make retail stores and maybe a restaurant up on the top deck.
Well, you
We
might
we
make
would
some
need,
money.
we would need to have a real estate commission to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not kidding.
and I'll tell
You
you
would,
something.
you would need to have people that are dedicated to developing property and then marketing those properties for rent. We
Bob, I did this when I was in a university's capacity, and we had a real estate committee, and
Right.
we owned real estate.
Right.
And it was extremely challenging. And the reason why was because it was not the expertise of the people sitting around the table, who were all very smart. Nobody wanted to invest the time. They weren't the contractors, they
Yep.
weren't the construction company, they weren't the management company, and they winded up having to hire people to do all this. They owned a lot of real estate outside of the university-owned real estate, and unfortunately, it just got to the point where it's just like, we just sell it, because this is not the business we want to be in. We're in higher education.
And the other thing about this is that the MTRAC committee, whose task is revenue, has been accused of being anti-business. And in fact, we're not anti-business. we're pro-revenue. And if a businessman wants to come in and make that property something spectacular, sell it to him.
Right.
And let him do it.
And
Well,
Stacy,
that's why I'm saying, I mean, I would think a restaurant, an upscale restaurant to be right on the beach in Cape May?
but we're locked in for 5 years now.
Now, yeah.
Well,
I mean, I
the-
think Stacy's point, you know, the thing.
But Stacy,
didn't
to
think
your,
about that
to your
soon.
point, even if the rental income is equal to the taxes and it's reasonably break even, but then we're bringing $5 million worth of cash in, and that means that lowers our borrowing costs.
Well, let me put it this way, though. That, it's 5 million today. What if they had sold it 10 years ago? Oh, we got $200,000 of it back. We're doing great.
Yep.
And we didn't, because we could have gotten, say, 5 million today. So I think there's a way that you have to weigh it out, because if the city has to go purchase property to do something with, then what are we purchasing? We're paying 5 million when we had the property to begin with.
So I think that there's a policy decision that needs to be made, that, is this a business that the city wants to be in? And then, if the answer is yes, we want to be in that business, then how are we going to run it?
Right, but there's also, but you're also losing the point, though, at Broadway, it houses our bathrooms in it, right? You can't just go on every area where there's an opening and say, we're going to build something there, because there's regulations that are against that. We're not to have a built-up beachfront. That's the,
But let
the
me-
issue we have.
Let's go back to the issue we talked about a couple of minutes ago. We have 6 or 7 of the biggest hotels along the beach, all very successful, are all using our beach. They rent it from us. What happens if they were able to buy the property on the beach right across from their hotel and make it part of their hotel?
And then where would the tourists go when they come into town? Because there'd be all these private beaches. Because back in time is when people did own those pieces. And then the city said, no, we don't want you to own it because we want to go and put our lifeguards are there.
Look at the zoning map. The beaches, the lots that we're talking about here on this list are not on the beach. They're on Beach Drive, and the beach is beyond that. These are the properties right on Beach Drive that they're supposed to use for their rental services. They're not doing it now because they're all over the beach. They go to the water line and put the chairs. They're not allowed to. And they've been told not to, but they do it anyway. The point is, let's say to them, if we can, legally and otherwise, let's say to them, you're a businessman, you want that beach access, we'll sell you the piece of property that's right across the street from your business, and then you can use it any way you want to, rather than renting our beach.
But back in the day, the reason why Steggers has the right to that beach without any rental to their Steggers Beach is because they at one time owned that beach. And the city said, they took it, I don't think they paid them any money for it, they took it over and they said, you can always rent there and have your rental services, but we want to have a lifeguard there so that all our beaches are protected for tourists when they come down.
When we have erosion, who's going to pay to pump in the sand and stuff?
If we don't own the beach, then we're going to be.
They're not renting the beach. We're not selling them the beach. We're selling them the parcels, the tax parcels on Beach Drive, which are right next to Beach Drive. They're not on the beach, they're on,
I
on
think
the
maybe,
promenade pretty
yeah, I think,
promenade.
right. I think maybe having a visual of it would help us, you know, because I think I'm.
let me suggest this. Do you have this? Does everybody have that?
I have that.
My pack.
If you don't have it, I'll send it to you. You know, as soon as I go home, I'll send you all the material. But let me suggest you do this. Take this list, and then go to the city website, and go to the planning and zoning section, and pull up the zoning map. And the zoning map is a little tricky to use, but you can adjust it to expand it and take a look at it and blow it up. And you can actually drill down on that map and identify each and every one of these little parcels. Because these parcels, none of them are on the beach. All of them are on the promenade. And the beach is a separate, completely separate parcel.
Dennis, I apologize, because I couldn't open any of the attachments that you sent to me, that's why I'm.
What the hell happened?
No, that's why I sent you, I was going to copy in everybody else.
Yeah, no.
Mine, it was corrupt.
The interesting thing about those parcels, though, it's because they're really kind of small and narrow, if you think about it, right? Like, you know, the one that you're talking about.
How many
the
feet
bathroom.
is it from the promenade?
They're on the promenade, basically. They are on the promenade. They sort of sit like a little bit
Some of
like
them
they're
are-
kind of like
some of them are
sitting on the
thin,
dune
and some-
almost.
And that's why there's so many of them. But some of them are deep. Like, for example, the one right next to
Well, clearly, the mermaid one is.
the restaurant, what's it called, the Prime or?
Primal?
Primal.
Yeah.
That, and the arcade?
Yeah.
That piece of property is clearly a rectangular shape.
Yes.
And the city-owned property right next to it is twice as big,
The one with
across from the golf course.
the one where we had the pilings on it to build the bathroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a huge piece of property,
So
and
Primal is a city, that's on a city-owned,
No,
No, they
no,
privately owned.
no.
Privately owned.
It's never been.
well, then why is 406 Beach? I thought you said 406
These are the
Beach.
these are the privately
Oh,
owned.
those are the
Yeah.
privately
Yeah,
owned.
that's down.
Yeah, I mean, some of them would, I mean, what would you build there? But, I mean, something like where Mermaid is, and those have
You
significant
can see when you see
Well, I'll
the
tell you,
map,
we
right
tried
in
to
the
build
center.
bathrooms there next to the,
Primal,
what you're talking
the
about.
arcade.
Well, it would be helpful if there
God
Well,
was,
and think about, just from a businessman's
only 20
perspective,
years
think
ago,
about
I think.
that property next to the Primal, which is bigger than, our
So-
property is bigger. Think of it's already a sort of a business district anyway.
So then do we want to have more buildings on the boardwalk? Is that what we're looking to do then?
You know where Carney's is?
Yeah.
Stand in front of Carney's, turn around and look at the ocean. You're looking at an arcade and a restaurant, and a city-owned lot that's empty. If that were a business, so what? It's in the middle of a business district.
The point is it should be evaluated. And it may not be aesthetically what anyone wants to agree to, but I think what Dennis's point is, look, there's a value to this. And if you're faced with increasing costs associated with personnel, health and welfare, costs, being, pushed down from the state, there's a reality to this that says if we really are needing to be able to build our infrastructure, personnel, police, fire, and, all of the other capital needs that go along with that, then, you're going to have to get the money from somewhere. And obviously, the last place anyone wants to get it from is the taxpayers. So,
but at the same time, the taxpayers don't want to go walking on the boardwalk and.
No,
not-
Russ, I don't, and that's why it needs to be a discussion as
But
to
I think
whether or
there's a
not.
plan- Yeah, there should probably be a plan, because the question would be, if we needed to do that, because I personally would not want to see all those businesses along the beach. I love to ride my bike and look at the ocean. But
Neither would I, but
I think that the reality of it is, we could be faced with the need to do something like that. The question is, which ones could gain us the most money? In what order would we want to do that, should we need to do that?
I just want to bring
All
up,
you would do is take a look at it in a very small measure. You might say, that lot, we're going to see, and just maybe not explore other lots, and wait for, the lease expiration on the Mermaid to be able to explore that one. This is something that you don't necessarily say, we're going to,
No.
20 lots are going to be,
No.
developed along, because I don't think anyone would want that.
bottom
Because
line,
you-
Martin's point, a while ago, the bottom line is, the city shouldn't be in the property development business.
but I don't know if they want property development there. It's one thing to say, we're not in property development, but do we want property development on the beachfront?
Well, Stacy,
I think, Stacey, you have to ask the question. I think faced with some of the economics,
but
you have
the
to present it in
Mermaid is
such a
already,
way
why
that says,
not?
this is the reality of what you could gain, this is what you might lose in that.
I would
And,
suggest,
you
could
know,
I? because
it's not us, it's a
10 to
planning.
6, that I would love to hear city council's feeling on this, before we spend a lot of time on this. I would like to hear whether city council is really interested in having us do something like this.
Well, so.
Because we could spend a lot of time, we've got a lot of things to work on, and.
Well, I would reverse that, if I were you.
Well,
But we'll get to the same point. I would say I would have the MTRAC saying to city council, in very broad conceptual terms, this is what we have.
Yeah, no.
We have properties which are sitting, to use a farmer's, they're sitting fallow. And some of them could be turned into real revenue that helps the city.
Potentially could be turned into.
Yeah, so it could be turned
Until it's
in.
put out on the marketplace, you don't
Let's-
know.
But does the council even want to pursue?
Pursue it.
Or other parcels can be protected. So,
And
so
I'm
Well,
with you, it's
but-
just,
but-
the council's already asked us to look at shared services. The council's already asked us to look at, you know,
Oh,
That's my point, is that we have not looked at the fire, or, I mean, the police, which is what you guys were tasked with at the
Right.
beginning of the year.
which we haven't.
And you haven't done, and that contract is coming up.
So that's all I'm trying to say,
Yeah.
is that in the order of priority, if city council, I'm fine, you want to put together and say, hey, you know, we have this information, is this something that is of interest, and where on the priority list is it for city council? That's all I ask.
well, I think, I'll take that as a yes,
That's a yes.
but with one added point. We recommend that this issue be looked at for its revenue potential. Not just to sit on the file cabinet, but there's revenue potential here.
There is revenue potential, that's true.
Okay, so we're talking about revenue potential. The parking committee wanted me to come to the MTRAC and say that performance parking, they wanted to bring it back to you because we are dealing with the jitney. We didn't want to start muddying the waters with performance parking, and they thought it'd be a good thing to take it back to MTRAC, which we have performance parking, but then we raised all the meters, so everything's all the same back again.
Yeah, I
So,
think-
and maybe, you know, we thought they'd throw it back to you and maybe discuss that.
More money based on their.
Oh, yeah.
Well, okay, that's one area of revenue.
Okay. I just wanted to throw it back because they want me to bring that back to
Yeah,
the
no,
Amtrak.
that's definitely an area to consider. And that's all part, there's other areas that we can look at revenue. But anyway, what's your pleasure here? I'm not doing anything unless you tell me to.
I think my opinion is that we begin to have those discussions and start to, as Russ was saying, is there a level of interest? What kind of a priority is it? Because it's a lot of money. This is a very, very large number. When you put the right market values, not the assessed values, on that piece of paper, it's, you know, $100 million. And that has a lot of potential.
And here's something else to consider to make that point. We built the convention hall, $10 million with cost
Yeah, yeah.
overruns. The current assessed value of that piece of property, even though it's not taxable, is $18.1 million. So there's real money here on the beach.
And convention hall is all on city property today?
Yep.
And if we're going to keep the real estate, then we have to find a better way to manage it, because we've just missed an opportunity with the Mermaid. We're now locked in for 5 years at a discounted rent for a restaurant that
We certainly
could be higher end if it were marketed properly.
I think, though, you know, we're saying, oh, we can get this money and that money. You know, being on council, what I've seen them do is, oh, let's go do this project. There is no focus on what they're actually spending the money for. So now you're going to give them more money, so they're not raising taxes, but what is it going to be used for? You know,
That's
we're-
interesting you
and
say
and I'm saying is because and everybody saw the council meeting, I'm going to say this, we're building arches without having a financial idea on how much it's going to cost. Supposedly, somebody's going to pay all of it, but that's just the arches, nothing else.
If we got,
And then,
you're bringing this point because it's on our agenda. We wanted to talk today about what the city is doing with the revenue that we generated as a result of occupancy tax. We think this committee should go to council and say, we gave you $1.8 million new dollars. What did you do with it? Where is it being spent? What are we getting for that yield?
because I think we're losing track, right, because we're not raising taxes, but they're bonding
Yeah,
more money
we wanted
than what
accounting.
and I think people would rather have their taxes raised than bonding for money that we're going to be just pushing down the side that we're going to have to pay for
So
eventually.
the recommendation of the committee, I would like to make the recommendation that the committee request that the council document how that $1.8 million is being spent.
So Stacy, I'm sorry, Dennis, go
Yeah,
ahead.
so-
No, it just popped into my head. So don't we have, I guess, I'm just used to having, you know, there's like, kind of like this wish list of things like we're just talking about now, public information or, you know, welcome center. There is no such thing as that, you know, we want to then, based on some
So-
of these things and the cost of that, where we want to look for revenue?
We didn't have the opportunity to say if we're going to recoup, because part of it was not knowing how much the occupancy tax would, bring in. But we did not, as a committee, have the ability to say, and we'd like it earmarked for the following 6 things. That was not part of what, we were able to do.
But do they have those 6 things?
No, so the money went into sort of the general, what we call the general administrative fund. And what Dennis is saying as a committee, we should have the ability to be able to say, look, we know it went into the general fund, but, are there anything that you can point to, at this point in time that says that you were able to do an additional, 2 more staff in the police department,
Right.
Another, a piece of equipment for fire, whatever it might be, there should be something that said at the beginning of the year, we didn't necessarily have the revenue to be able to fund this, but because of this additional revenue, we were able to,
We were
That makes
hopeful,
sense.
as an example, that we were going to get at least one new enforcement person.
Right.
an area that we had been earmarking, thinking that that was an area that we would see an
think that's the
additional
perfect
staff
thing to
person.
say.
And did we get that?
I don't know.
Well, I should say, not to date.
Got it.
Well, we did get some of that. The other thing we asked for when we first made the pitch was administrative support for the fiscal operation.
Right.
And they did hire part-timers that were helpful, but with the CFO now leaving the city, my personal feeling is we're in a big problem.
Boy, I'd say,
We're in a big problem.
yeah.
Because that was a resource that, from my experience, might actually be irreplaceable.
And like I would say that council should have a number of items they want to accomplish during the year with
Right.
projects, and they should be the focus. It shouldn't come up, hey, you know what, somebody just presented something, let's go do this project now, how about this project? It should be, these are what we want to do, and then it shouldn't be, oh, we have extra money, let's go do this, let's go do that, oh, let's go get a grant. Nothing's ever free. You get a grant, the water transmission line that we did across, it was supposed to be, I don't know, the grant was supposed to cover it, say, $400,000. It ended up costing us over $1 million that, wasn't put there. We were supposed to do the project because it was going to pay for itself, and it never paid for itself.
Well, the other thing is the West Cape May contract with the police. That's a lot of work. I mean,
That's 2025 is the target date, but yeah, we are going to start, that's one of our things we're going to do this year.
that's what they asked us to.
The city-owned property, just
That's
to
what we
put
just
it,
talked about.
yeah, I would just say on the city-owned property, the other thing, it would be helpful, at least for me, maybe not for others, but if you're going to have something like that, it'd be nice to see like a chart or a graph that shows the lots where,
Well, that's the zoning map,
yeah,
yeah. If you, it's, the easiest way to use the zoning map is to use it on the internet,
okay.
and that's, go on the city website.
Go on the city website and it'll actually show it, so you can see the
Yeah.
lot size and
Yeah.
how, the width of the lot.
Yep. You just have to drill down into it,
Okay.
use the expanding things, but it's clearer, actually, it's clearer on a screen on a computer than it is if you printed it off,
Yeah, no, I'm sure.
because you can expand it, zoom it.
Okay.
So, well, I wanted to talk about the use of new revenue. Fiscal staffing is going to be a very serious problem because we're losing the head of that office, and that office is already understaffed. They can't, it came out pretty clearly in the budget discussions last week that there's 2 streams of functionality in the fiscal office. One of them is the clerical stuff, keeping the books, keeping the numbers straight and all the rest of it. The other is planning and policy. And they're shorthanded on the bookkeeping side, and now we're going to be absent on the policy side.
Well, they're going to replace the position, aren't they?
Okay, yeah. Talk about, how about a learning curve?
I think we have to make sure that when we give somebody these positions, we don't give them stipends to do another couple other jobs along with it, so that if they need 40 hours to do their job, they have the 40 hours, and they're not doing other work for
Well,
income.
Last year, we recommended, and the council did adopt the ordinance on stipends, which I think, I hope is going to be helpful.
Well, one of the stipends that they put in, which I objected to, was a person gets $10,000 for special projects. and it's haphazard, so there's no real focus on what that
No,
job
yeah,
is.
I mean, that's a dangerous and can be a slippery slope because it's just, it's undefined.
Exactly.
It should be predetermined at the beginning of a quarter or the beginning of a reporting period, what your special project is, and you should have things that, at the end of it, you sit down and there's a document associated with your accomplishments.
I agree.
I think that there needs to be, as part of this recruitment effort, for this CFO, you're not going to have somebody who may come in here in this role who's going to be very functional, task-oriented, and expecting to do clerical-type work. 'Cause that's not normally the role of a CFO, someone coming in at that caliber. So there needs to be a preparedness on the part of council and city manager to understand that they may need to adjunct that staff in some way. This is an individual who's going to come in with, a background or an education or a career that is going to have said, I'm more focused on policy and planning, I'm more focused on metric reporting, analytics, and not doing data entry on an operating budget.
I'd like somebody to do this stuff instead of the MTRAC committee doing it. All right, that's where we are.
Dennis, you want a job?
Yeah. I'll take that as a joke, Bob.
Make a motion?
Yes, second.
Second, sorry, and I'll get the stuff to everybody as soon as possible. I don't know what the hell happened.
I will, yeah. Yeah, no, yep.
When you get the material, all this stuff will make a lot more sense.
Mary, what was your email address? S?